In a different universe, the entire world was celebrating the defeat of the greatest villain. Hordes of people had gathered to shower praise at the hero who defeated the Demon King and brought peace to the world. There will be no more monster invasions, and no more innocent civilians will die needlessly. This fantasy world of Isgard has finally reached an era of peace after centuries of war. In an alley, two kids were running to see the hero who had just come victorious from his battles. The boy urges his sister to hurry up before they miss everything. For them, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity they can't miss. While running, the boy comes across a passing figure in a dark robe. His presence is such that the boy's body freezes on the spot. When his sister catches up to him, she's confused to see the frozen state of his brother and looks in the direction of the robed figure. She doesn't understand why the man is walking in the opposite direction of the hero's parade, and her brother is scared that she might draw unwanted attention. He tells her to look away. Looks like the boy was able to identify that the robed figure is a dark magician, a sinister class of mages who dabble in the powers of darkness. His sister doesn't really understand the big deal behind being a dark magician, but the brother educates her that it basically means that person in the dark robe is cursed. The man in dark robes carries a white sack on his shoulder and walks a lonely road towards the cathedral, where the saint of this era awaits his arrival. As she was gazing at the world that will finally get to see some peace, she hears a knock on the door. When she turned, the robed figure stands there at the entrance. Her golden hair are a symbol of her divine powers, and her white robes signify her purity. She looks at the man and welcomes him back. In contrast, the robed figure's dark clothes and silent presence give off nothing but sinister vibes. If the saint is a being of pure energy, the robed man is the incarnation of darkness. His name is Minold, and when he unpacks the sack which contains the head of the Demon King, it is revealed to us that he was in fact the true hero all along. But due to the dark nature of his powers, he had to become a shadow, while a useless man in fancy armor took all the glory. The saintess thanks the dark magician on behalf of the empire, but her words are cut short by the magician. He has but one desire. He did all that was asked of him, and now he wants the saintess to fulfill her end of the promise. The saintess wears a grim expression, but assures the magician that she remembers her promise and will be sure to fulfill it. And since that will be the case, perhaps she should refer to the dark magician not as Minold, but as Kim Minjun, which was his original name before he was forcefully summoned to this world. Standing under the statue of the goddess, the saintess tries to have a heart-to-heart discussion with the protagonist. She tells her that she's sorry he had to bear such a heavy responsibility, and she explains that she did not give him such a job because she hated him. In fact, she will be forever in his great debt. But the man replies that he hates her so much that he could die right now. Even when met with such a cold response, the saintess says that she will do everything in her power to change the people's opinion about the dark mages in this world. She begs the man to reconsider his wish to go back to his old world. But there's nothing to consider in Kim Minjun's mind. He replies that he has already been used enough. Now, he simply wishes to return to his world in one piece. She sighs and says that if he stays behind for the sake of the empire, she promises that he will be rewarded for all of the ill treatment he has received thus far, and more. But looks like she was too late, and the dark magician tells her to stop her acting. The saintess protests that she's not acting and is being very sincere with her words, to which the protagonist replies that there is nothing she can give him. The saintess' eyes widen with surprise. By virtue of being the god's chosen, she holds quite a lot of power in this world. So what does this man desire that she cannot provide? He replies that he was brought here by force. He was used like a slave, and now she wants him to stay behind so he can wipe her ass some more. For him to forsake his life like this, what can the saintess give him in return? She answers that she can grant whatever he desires, because if he were to cease existing, the empire's peace may not hold for long. But then, the protagonist asks for his first wish to be granted. He wants to eat Korean fried chicken, but the saintess doesn't even know what it looks like. He asks for kimchi, but once again, the saintess doesn't know anything about it. He complains that the food in this world is disgusting. He has eaten nothing but high-calorie biscuits all these years. How can he be expected to live in a world where he's forced to eat such trash? And if he can't be provided with good food, can the saintess at least provide him with a gaming PC and a good internet connection? Of course, none of that is possible in an undeveloped world like this. In the end, the saintess clenches her fist and gives up on keeping him in this world. He never belonged here in the first place.
She drops her head in defeat and agrees to start the return ceremony right away. She takes him to the summoning chamber, where the protagonist reminisces his memory of the past when he was first summoned, and is happy that he will never have to see this place again. The saintess tells him to stand in the summoning circle in the middle and proceeds to start the return ceremony. And then, a bunch of magic patterns start moving under the protagonist's feet right away. She tells him that she will start by removing the protection of the saint from his body first. Kim Minjun takes off his glove and looks at the hand with the saint's symbol on it. Even though it's called a protection, it's just a leash that stops the summoned person to fight the saint. He's glad to finally be getting rid of it. The saintess holds out her hands, and a radiant light purifies the symbol from the protagonist's hand. She seems quite perplexed, because not only the dark magician will be giving up on all the incredible power he built up over the years, he is also refusing to take all the riches and the fame that he would get by staying here. But the man is fed up with this world and asks the saintess to mind her own business. Instead, he asks why the saintess isn't concerned about this situation. Once the symbol is completely gone, he could kill her if he wanted to. But the woman replies that she knows she is the root cause of all the hatred in his heart. If he were to kill her, she would gladly accept her death. And now that the protection is undone, she tells him to kill her if he'd like. And if he has no such desire, she'd like to start the next stage of the ceremony. The next step involves removing the powers the protagonist has obtained in the world of Isgard, and the saintess steps back from the circle to complete this process. But this is where things won't go as according to the saintess, but how the dark magician wants. He quickly hurls a rope of binding dark energy to subdue the saintess and hold her up in the air. She tells the man that possessing the powers of this world will kill him if he uses the dimensional gate. What he's doing is complete nonsense. But this man worked himself to death to obtain these powers. There's no way he will leave them behind before going back. He drops the saintess on her ass and proceeds to open the dimensional gate himself. Even though her life was spared, the saintess is more concerned that the dark magician will never be able to open the dimensional gate with his unholy powers and will probably die as a result. But looks like her worries were unwarranted, since the protagonist was already standing there with a fully functioning portal. Even then, the saintess warns him that he's risking his life by attempting to travel the dimensions so rashly. But he was already aware of such things. That's why he practiced his magic thousands of times to perfect it. He's confused why the people of this world divide the magic into light and darkness in the first place. When he reached the peak, he realized that all magic is the same anyway. In any case, he puts his hand in his pocket and says that there is something he would like to give to the saintess before he leaves. What could it be? Nothing. It's just a fist, which he tells the saintess to shove up her ass as he enters the portal, knowing that he will never have to see this stupid world ever again. She shouts for the protagonist to stop before the portal destabilizes and kills the caster. But it was already too late, and the summoning chamber was soon filled with waves of bright purple energy. And then, the portal collapsed on itself and vanished into thin air, leaving the saintess all by herself in the chamber. She slams her fist on the floor in anger. Even though they had their differences, she's upset that she was hated to this extent when she did nothing but fulfill her duty. She never wanted to make anyone suffer, and she never enjoyed putting the protagonist through all that hardship. But now, none of that matters, since the two of them are worlds apart from each other. In an unassuming building on Earth, purple lighting sparks, and Kim Minjun is teleported inside. Finally, he's back on the planet he was taken from. Even though he did it so confidently, he felt like he was going to die during the dimensional travel. But all of that is finally over. As he stands, he finds himself in the same room he was summoned from. And when he looks at his table, his phone is still charging. This sensation of having your phone in your hand. Minjun can't describe in words how much he missed this feeling. And his favorite game, Dungeon Power Fighter, is still installed inside. Only when he opened the game, the reality started kicking in his mind, and he couldn't help but laugh maniacally at his successful return to Earth. But it's too soon to be happy. For some reason, there's no internet connectivity in his apartment. And outside, a squad of soldiers is hugging the walls as if they are in a war zone. The unit commander asks if they're correctly headed in the direction of the creature, and the scout confirms that they're on the path relayed by the radioed location. He asks his corporal why regular soldiers like them were dispatched to deal with something so dangerous, and the corporal is just as confused. He says that such questions should be asked to the headquarters. He knows nothing. Nothing can be done now, and they have no choice but to fight. So the soldiers take a deep breath and get ready for battle. On the corporal's signal, they rush to the road and turn the corner to shoot the enemy. But what they see is completely different from what they were after. Him and June is walking the streets, pissed at the fact that his phone is getting no network connection, and not a single store is open in the area even though it's the middle of the day. The soldiers are confused to see a civilian in an area that was restricted from access, and shout for the young man to come back to them. Minjun is also surprised to see the armed soldiers. He wonders what the army is doing in a civilian area. He assumes that the soldiers must be doing their training drills and apologizes for getting in the way. And that's when the soldiers notice something behind Minjun and shout at him to run away as fast as he can. When he turns around to see what has the soldiers so flustered, he couldn't have been more confused by the bizarre sight before him. A huge wolf-like monster is leaping at the protagonist to rip him apart with its claws. But he wasn't surprised because of the monster. He was surprised why something so weak-looking could have the soldiers so scared. After all, he just came from a world where he fought much stronger monsters for years. But when he clenched his fist to summon his dark powers, the demonic energy failed to manifest. It was completely gone. Not that it really matters in this case,
since Minjun is able to crush such small fry with his sheer strength, and has no trouble burying the wolf monster's face in the ground.
The soldiers are stunned silent by this superhuman display of power, and the monster's teeth break off completely from the force of the impact. The fact that it dared to attack him is still pissing off Minjun, and he brutally crushes the monster's skull with bare hands. Even though he can't use his dark magic due to lack of the demonic
energy, he's still not weak enough to be beaten by such monsters. After all, he went through hellish strength training every day when
he was in his guard. Still, he knows of the identities of these creatures. But why has it appeared in this world? He has a lot of questions, and only the ones behind him can answer them for now. But when he calls for their attention, the soldiers are so scared that they can barely speak. After talking for some time, the soldiers take the protagonist in an army vehicle to escort him out of the restricted area. The corporal warns the man that he was wandering too far in a monster-infested area. Under normal circumstances, he could have been arrested. But since the commander told them not to escalate the situation, they're just letting him go. But how is it possible that he really doesn't know about anything that's happening in the world? The protagonist simply lies that he had been living abroad. But regardless, this isn't the Korea he used to know. The phenomenon of dungeons appeared when he was around 7 years old. Monsters from dungeons started appearing in real life. He recalls the soldiers and military beating them up like right now. And with the appearance of dungeons, superhumans called the Awakened also started appearing. Fate had abilities that surpassed the level of average humans. They joined the Hunter Corps, which was newly established at the military base, and completely wiped out the monsters as soon as they appeared. So prior to being summoned by that saint, Korea had no danger of being harmed in the civilian areas. And now there's an even bigger problem. Due to the current chaotic state of the world, is it possible that the Dungeon Power Fighters servers are completely gone? If that happened, then Kim Minjun wonders what was the point of coming back to Earth in the first place. The corporal can't help but be suspicious of this man's behavior. The world is in a state of chaos, so how is it possible that he doesn't know about anything simply because he was living abroad? But then again, he doesn't have the balls to ask questions that don't concern him. He already witnessed the protagonist's strength firsthand. Kim Minjun calls for the corporal's attention and asks if the people evacuated safely during the crisis, especially people like game developers. And is it possible to get a job in this day and age, especially in a game company? What about the destruction of building? Are places like the server storage systems okay? Looks like his needle is stuck on the game, and he needs some answers. The corporal replies that he will explain everything from the start. The reason the situation got this bad is because of the weird phenomenon that started to spread from the dungeons 2 years ago. One day, the dungeons began to appear much more frequently and started getting larger as well. But the biggest problem was the increasing number of giant monsters that kept coming from these strange dungeons. Because of that, the military couldn't control the dungeons anymore, and the situation got so far as to lock down some of the civilian areas. Since then, the military has been trying different methods to fight back, but they lack in numbers. Minjun is extremely disappointed to hear this explanation. He doesn't give a crap about such matters. The only thing he wants to know is whether the game companies are doing all right, because he wants to play Dungeon Power Fighter. The corporal asks the protagonist how old he is, and he replies that he's probably 21 this year. The corporal suggests that he should enlist in the military soon if that's the case, since half of his 20s are about to evaporate into thin air. Minjun doesn't understand. The mandatory military service used to be 5 years for the Hunter Corps and 3 years for regular troops, so why would he need to waste half of his 20s? But since the situation has worsened in recent years, all troops now serve for 5 years, not just the Hunter Corps. If Minjun is 21, he probably has his enlistment letter ready. What a disappointment. He came back so he could live the rest of his life in easy mode and play his favorite games. But now he has to serve in the military for 5 years. He's furious that he didn't even get to connect with the game servers yet. That's when his phone finally receives some network, and he gets a message from the military. It's an enlistment date notice to join the X Division, and the enlistment date is tomorrow.
The timing couldn't have been more uncanny, so the protagonist assumes that this is probably some spam message. But the corporal assures him that it's real and not a spam. Once again, it is a huge shock to the boy. How can the military enlist people without even a physical examination? And how does it make sense to notify you only 1 day before enlisting? But the corporal replies that the military is extremely short on manpower, and such practices
Have become very normal, and for the notice, he's sure that he just saw it late. He suggests Minjun to go to the internet cafe close to the evacuation center and double-check his status himself. The mention of the PC cafe filled Minjun with new life. When his parents went missing, he just holed himself up in his house and played games. But then, he was summoned to discard when he was in grade 12, without even a single friend. And after years of hell, he gets to experience the forgotten paradise of humanity, an internet cafe where the servers of his favorite gamer still live, and he can play it to his heart's content. As he wastes away his hours in this haven, he keeps ordering all the fast food that he missed eating in his previous world. Even the waitress is shocked to see how much he can eat. And now that his need to play games has been handled, it finally starts hitting him how the world has changed completely. He checked the internet news articles, and everything the corporal said was true, including the enlistment date that he'd been notified about earlier. As the text message had said, the due date was tomorrow. If he possessed all of his powers from Isgard, he would have been able to clear every single dungeon by himself. But for some reason, his body is completely depleted of the demonic energy that is the main source of his dark magic. But it's not like he's defenseless. In fact, he's confident that he can still clear all the dungeons by himself. And after thinking about it for a few minutes, he shouts out loud with his newfound resolve. If it means saving his favorite games from getting wiped out, he has resolved himself to solve everything by himself. The next day, he walked into the National Defense Center as per the enlistment instructions. He was surprised to see so many people who had come for the same purpose. Some were saying farewell to their families, and some to their lovers. No matter where he looked, he was amused to see everyone's depressed expressions. And then, the announcer called for all soldiers to report to the auditorium immediately. I guess the military isn't how it used to be, but Minjun doubts it will be as tough as Isgard. Inside the auditorium, the commanders were shouting and cursing at the new recruits to show discipline and stand up straight. They're dropping the F-bombs in every sentence and forcing miserable vibes on every soldier. The recruits are surprised to see this horrible treatment when they haven't even started, and Minjun is surprised to hear these weak insults as compared to his Spartan teachers from Isgard. In contrast, the military instructors are actually really nice. This is when the battalion commander steps to the podium and calls for everyone's attention. Before starting their agendas, he asks the new recruits to raise their hands if they want to apply to the Hunter Corps and didn't get the chance thus far.
He incentivizes the recruits by saying that the Hunter Corps receives a different treatment and has a much higher base pay. But even then, no one raises their hands. The commander informs the recruits that this is just a formality for now, there is no need to be so nervous. But looks like he missed someone. Among the crowd, a single volunteer had raised his hand. Of course, it was none other than Kim Minjun. The commander asks for the volunteer to step forward immediately. Heeding his superior's first command, he pushes against the ground with such force that the floor cracks, and when he jumps into the air, he's flying well above everyone's heads. He lands majestically on top of the podium, and the battalion commander can do nothing but look at him with immense surprise. This is when he introduces himself as the recruit Kim Minjun, and says that he would like to apply to the Hunter Corps. This is how the legend of the greatest hunter to ever exist on Earth began.